An error occurred. You're live. Just say 3 seconds.
Hey y'all. You doing your intro?
Good evening.
Is it?
So basically, so I guess I gotta open up the show and introduce the show. We back for, was this the second show? I don't think we're gonna try to keep track of how many shows.
Probably not.
We probably lose count. But hello, welcome back to Payne Reality.
Payne Reality.
Funny times, serious times, uh, transparent, heartfelt discussion. Couple of things. I want to apologize for last week. People was leaving comments and we didn't see them. I guess my account was set on private. So we got you this week. If you got a question, you want to share something, by all means, please do. Hopefully we get to everybody that shares or that got a question or anything like that. Last week we just kind of introduced the show, introduced like, why we started this or why we came up with this idea. Just like we said last week, just a lot of stuff goes on behind closed doors. Um, but this week we're gonna jump into talking about stepkids or no. So basically, we're going to talk a little bit about, from both of our perspectives, just the good times, some of the down times, some of the struggles, um, just some of the things, people might have different questions about whether or not they want to have stepkids, whether they want to get involved with somebody with kids and stuff like that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. It should be interesting conversation. By all means, like I said, if you have stepchildren, please, if you feel like sharing, share in the comments. We'll share that out a little bit. If you have questions, by all means, do that as well. But we can go ahead and get started. Tia?
Of course, send it to me. So, like he said, one of the big things that we had to deal with when trying to blend our family is we both brought two children to the marriage. And so, of course, there's always the, do they call you mom? Do they call you dad? Like, what do they call you? And so that's always a big question when we're dealing with blending our families. Not only did we both bring two children, but we also had two children as well. And so then, of course, we have the conversation of, um, is y'all's kids together treated the same as the step kids, quote unquote? And what does that look like for us? And so I'll start by saying, like, for years, that was, one of our struggles when we eventually ended up having kids. But I will say, right off the bat, I feel like we were hit with that step kid thing. Like, I don't know if anybody's ever been in a relationship, even in marriage, where you're trying to blend his side and her side. It's a thing. I mean, unfortunately, it's like a thing. It's a thing. And so I think probably some of the downfall when it came to us is because my two that I brought, they came with a very toxic parent. And so we, of course, went through that situation of, you can't tell me what to do because you're not my dad um, issue. But, I think, let's see. Oh well, I needed it 12 years ago, Jasmine. So, and we about to be married 13 years. But that's why I referenced last week that book, God Breathes on Blended Families. I do think it takes a heart to really come in to try to blend. It really, really do. Especially like with me and Jude, we ended up having two kids together. Not to mention the two that we brought into the marriage as well. And so they're for me, my perspective may be different than his perspective, but for me, I always felt like because their dad was so it was an issue with their dad. It was a real big issue with their dad, and so I think it made it hard to attempt to have relationship with my two that I brought in. Now, when it came to his two that he brought in, we didn't really have that issue. Although there was that long period of time where there was some drama, but on my end, like I never, and even if so, I don't my I don't call them step kids, okay? Like I call them like bonus sons or something like that. But my youngest bonus son, I remember one time he was up for the summer and he got upset with me. And so he sure did blurted it out so quick. You can't tell me what to do because you is not my mama. And I kind of felt some kind of way, like it kind of hurt my feelings
Did I know that?
because yes, you
I
did.
don't think I knew that.
You did. You knew that.
Did I chop him in the throat?
You did.
Okay.
You
All
did.
right. I'm making sure, America.
Yeah.
Making sure.
Yeah. So
Or Akron, whoever tuning in.
it really did. It hurt my feelings because I didn't feel like they weren't my kids. I didn't feel like I couldn't be as involved with them as I was with my kids. If I went out and bought candy, the whole troop was getting candy. When I did anything, it was all of them included. And so when he said that, and although I logically I understood that he was angry because I told him no about something, it still hurt. It hurt that, oh, I mean, I know I'm not your mom, but oh, like, it kind of pinched a little bit. But I never felt any different. And I don't know how else to put it. I didn't feel like, they weren't my boys. I still feel like those are my boys. Although I didn't birth them, they're still my children because they came from him. But I do feel like he didn't have that same experience. And although there was a time where we didn't see the boys for a very long time, I still never felt like they weren't my boys. But when it came to Jalen and Janai, they were here pretty much constantly, except the random times they would go see their dad. And so his experience with him ever feeling like, are these my kids or am I just a stepdad, was a different experience that for him. And then my perspective of that was very different as well, because I personally felt like my kids were treated differently. Um, and that was something that we struggled with for a very very long time, that it was different. And sometimes I would think like, okay, is it different in my perspective? Is it different because their dad is so toxic, or is it different because he simply just don't like my kids? And so we struggled quite a bit, trying to find a good rhythm, like a good pattern, for our family, because I would honestly say probably as long as we've been married, probably one of the biggest issues we faced is our kids. Now, I can't even say our kids. I can say Jalen and Janai. I think that has been our biggest struggle.
You name
Um,
names.
Everybody know who my kids is. They all over Facebook. So I personally feel like that's where our biggest struggle came in when it came to trying to blend our family. Was how differently was the kids treated? How did he feel about my kids? And I always compared it like, wait, I love your boys. I feel like you don't like my kids. So it was kind of like this to me for a long, long time. through prayer and different things, of course, my perspective on that changed. But if, in all honesty, maybe perspective probably didn't change till probably about 3 years ago. No, maybe 2 years ago that my perspective really started shifting and tilting, um, when it came to who he was as a person. That was different for me because when it comes to kids, I'm very open I love kids, so I'm very open when it comes to kids. I'm drawing them in, asking questions and all that type of stuff. And Drew was polar opposite when it comes to stuff like that. Like last week we was talking about, we had two totally different parenting styles. So his parenting style often triggered me, who was raised in an abusive household. And then he probably looking at me like, man, can you say something? And I'm like, they kids. They just kids. So that's my perspective of it. Like, what about you?
Um, it's tough. It can be tough. Um, like before I even get into talking about that, like I'm just be completely clear. Like when I was younger, I was always like, I'm not getting with nobody with no kids. All right, so that my mind was made up. When I got out of college, when I was living life, I'm like, I ain't getting with nobody with kids. It's not how it always works. So with that said, when we did get married, I mean, I did come in with the understanding of like, I'm not just marrying her, right? Like she has kids, I got kids, so there's gonna have to be some type of blend. But when you do get into the marriage or the relationship, before even talking about anything else, like I would say one thing that I don't think that we did that we probably should have was like talk to all the kids about us getting married.
Yeah.
Like together. I can't say that she didn't talk to Jalen Janai, or I didn't talk to Deontay and Tyshawn individually or separately, but I think having that conversation. Because sometimes kids, even young kids, will tell you exactly how they feel. Like, I don't want you to get married. And I mean, it's totally up to you whether or not you're like, so, like, remember Jody's mom on Baby Boy? You know, she was like, she got to have a life too. So maybe that's how you respond to him or whatever. But just having that conversation, I think that could have changed some stuff, could have gone a long way. Even if it's, maybe we don't get married right now at this point or whatever the case. With that said, though, um, it was just tough. Like starting out, it was just tough because to me, it was like I said last week, it was I'm gonna be a little tough now so that okay, by the time they teenagers and we sending them out in the world and they want to go to dances or go to somebody's house or go here or go there, we can trust that okay, you out there not acting a fool. And not that they just go out and act a fool now or things like that, but I do think that some of the struggles we had from them originally and just coming through the marriage, I do think some of those have shown through later on down the line. Um, I just think that I don't know. It's just tough. I just keep saying that, but it can be really tough because, like she said, different upbringings, something might trigger her. I might be sitting back like, "Are you gonna say something?" Sometimes I would say something and still feel like, man, maybe I shouldn't have said nothing because okay, they looking like he mean, she looking like he mean. I'm looking like, no, I'm trying to have order. Like it ain't about being mean. I'm trying to have order. So those conversations, even asking them, when am I mean? Oh, when you tell us what to do. When do I tell you what to do? When we ain't doing what we supposed to do. So on one hand, I'm thinking like, well, they kids and they understand. But then on the other hand, she's like, well, they kids and they gonna do this. And I'm like, I know that. I know kids are gonna make mistakes and stuff like that. And I know sometimes I could be too tough. But I think it's different variables. Um, like she said, like somebody asked last week about the reprogramming and stuff like that. But I mean, a lot of outside factors, but I think a lot of it is internal for real, where it's like, how was I raised? Or how was this person raised? Or what is this trigger in me? You know what I mean? So things like that. So years down the line, I had to learn like, okay, pick your battles. Maybe you step back and let her deal with some of the stuff. And then it's like, okay, change your approach. Maybe not completely, but you change your approach a little bit, see what happens then. But and in some cases, even that doesn't necessarily work. But
So what would so sometimes I feel
Oh,
like
oh, I can't see that.
you need glasses?
No, you got it hidden.
I do not. It's right there.
Oh, thank you. Neither one of us. I mean, thank you very much.
Um, so I think like part of our marriage counseling, like I think I'm just going to suggest when you get married, everybody needs marriage counseling. And that's one of the things that has to be discussed if you're bringing children into the union. What is your idea of discipline? Like
Mm.
I don't like I have discipline to a certain extent, but then I don't have discipline. Um, a lot of times when it came specifically with Jalen and Janai, I feel like I always tried to make up, or like Jew, it was rough. It was rough for us for a long time, and so they didn't have what I would say was a normal childhood until they were probably three, maybe four. So for those first 4 years, it was just us, fighting the good fight, so to speak. Like we literally out here trying to survive, trying to find our way, me trying to get out of a bad marriage, from abuse, verbal abuse, all of those type of things. And so they in a sense, would take care of me. I would get real bad migraines and stuff like that, and so Jalen and Janai knew how to adjust playing, so I didn't have to hear the noise. They knew how to take care of me through like migraines. We slept on the air mattress, all of us together. So it was like always all us together. And so then, I didn't have that conversation with them, that I was getting married. They didn't even come because the weekend we got married was their dad's
Did I do
weekend,
that? I didn't
and
do that.
for whatever reason, which he rarely took his weekends, on this weekend he actually took his weekend,
What you
and
did?
so it was one of those things of do I tell Jalen and Janai? We might need to put it on a flatter surface.
Yeah, don't go up there.
It was one of those things of do I tell Jalen and Janai that me and Julius are getting married? Do I have the fight with their dad that they can't come this weekend, even though it's your weekend because I'm getting married and I want them? So they came home, what, on a Sunday night,
Mm-hmm.
and boom, me and Jude was married. So that in itself had to be a shock to them. And so I always felt like I was trying to make up for those first few years, and even trying to make up because they weren't a part of, saying I do. It wasn't like Janai was a flower girl or Jalen was a ring bearer or anything like that. They went to visit their dad and then they came home to their whole entire world literally was shifted to something different. Um, and in part, I felt like I don't want to have this fight with their dad because literally, as soon as he found out, it was the same old conversation. I can't believe you did this. How could you get married? God hates marriage, and you committing adultery because you got It was just a whole bunch of stuff. And on the weekend that I got married, I didn't want to have to deal with that. So it was easier just to send Jalen and Janai, with their dad. Have your weekend, and we'll figure it out when you get home. So I think I was always in protective mode when it came to Jalen and Janai, and that was something that we didn't talk about when we got married. I don't. Did you even know half of the stuff about my marriage that you do now when we got married?
No.
Yeah, I don't even think he knew. Which I'm a firm believer that I don't got to tell you if it does not impact now. However, I will say that was something that greatly impacted our marriage. My prior marriage greatly. You're very
Oh,
okay.
sorry.
So my prior marriage greatly impacted our marriage. Still today, it greatly impacted it. So I think prior to us getting married, some of those conversations should have been had. But at the same time, I was still learning, everything that I had been through. I was still putting names to stuff that I had been through. So, how do you have a conversation with someone when you don't know how to have the conversation with somebody? Do you just go say, hey, well, this is what my ex husband used to do to me, and this is what my dad did to me, and this is how we grew up? And that was not a conversation that I was, willing to have. And, hindsight is 2020. Because I brought kids to the marriage, that's definitely a conversation that we should have had, because, you know, I was in protective mode. Like, I literally was in protective mode for years with Jalen and Janai. Um, and, sometimes it was anything he said, and I'm not saying that, like, I never really confronted him in front of Jalen and Janai. So, I mean, I had some good stuff in my head, like, they don't need to see us arguing. They don't need to take this back to their dad. And, that's just a whole nother, issue. So I was kind of careful about, what I did say to him. But listen, when we go to our room, it was the questions, the questions, the questions a lot. Because I was being triggered, and I can say I was being triggered now, but then I didn't know what that was. I just knew, like, wait, what's going on? Um, and I think that brought even more difficulties into our marriage. That if we had had those discussions, or even me, if I had opened up about that, I didn't talk about those things. No one knew about those things except me and who it happened with. Um, and so I think that was like a great disservice, coming into a marriage not having that discussion. And I think that's a disservice in a lot of marriages, especially when we're talking about blending families. Like, you got to lay it on the line when you blend in families, or it ends. Listen, there was a lot of times where I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And I was ready to peace out. A lot of times, when you're lacking, communication in certain areas, um, a lot of times it's easier to say, I'm out. I can't do this anymore. And that was sometimes some of my friends had to pull me back from the ledge, because I'm like, listen, I done found an apartment. He keeping the Kendall and Julian, because they're not about to drive me crazy, ask me where their dad is all the time. And I literally would tell my friends that. um, but it was a lot of times where I'm like, this is not working, and it's not worth staying in a house dealing with this type of heartache when we simply just couldn't blend. And some of that stuff we would have never had to deal with if we would have had those conversations before saying I do. um, and we grow up, what happened in the house stays in the house, and sometimes we take that into our relationships. And I think that's the part where we got to start changing that narrative, because although, to a certain extent, some of those conversations are true, but when it comes to trauma, if you about to get married, your spouse soon to be, they got to understand your trauma, or how else are they going to deal if you happen to be triggered. Now, mind you, this is me being triggered before Tia walked in healing and deliverance and freedom. But before then, we didn't know nothing about that. We just knew that, okay, here's a big issue. Like, we went through marriage counseling a lot after we got married, and half the time it was because of the kids. We were very different when it came to, how we raise kids. And then I'm very, Judy used to always tell me, stop counseling me. Why are you counseling me? Every time we talking, you counseling me. I mean, I don't take that away from him, because that's his perspective. I can't take his perspective away. Um, I, however, don't feel like I just ask deep questions. I feel like I ask deep questions.
I guess I don't
What did you?
I don't agree that they're always just deep questions. Like, I mean, you're a counselor, so when it's a conversation or it's questions, you get in the counselor mode at times, or you did. So I mean,
I mean, but
it just was what it was.
I don't understand. I still don't understand what that means. But I mean, again, I don't. I'm really big about not trying to take your perspective away from you, even when we didn't agree. Like, some stuff, some conversation we would often have very hard conversations, and I would just be like, dude, say what it is. You're not going to hurt my feelings. I'm not going to walk away with hurt feelings. I might not agree with everything you're saying, but if that's your perspective of what it is that we're dealing with, I can't take that away from you. That wouldn't be fair. So say, say what it is, so we can get to the bottom of it. That's my mindset versus counseling. I just see. I don't agree with that terminology. I
See,
just feel
I mean it.
like,
That's your perspective. That was my perspective. It just came off as more counseling than an actual conversation. Because because if we're talking and you ask me a question and I need a few minutes to think about it or something, and it's like you say what it is, and it's like, okay, I'm trying to formulate what it is so I can say what it is. But I we didn't have a conversation about your past, but being realistic, I think it would have changed some stuff, but I don't know how much it would have changed. And I only say that because I told you before, like it always felt like my kid's my kid. Like you would literally say that to me, like my kid, and I'm like, yes. You like you don't like my kids, and I'm like, there are kids. I'm like I don't like what they're doing, but you know what I'm saying. So like that creates or created bubbles. Y'all had y'all bubble, then we had the whole bubble where we might all be in there, not necessarily getting along or whatever the case. Then it might be a bubble with me and Kendall, me and Julian and Kendall. You know what I'm saying? You, Julian and Kendall. Just different caveats, different burrows, different bubbles where it's like, okay, I'm gonna compartmentalize. All right, you say something to them, oh, you being mean or you don't like, and it's like, no, like, and then even like when I explained it, like, look, I'll be on them because I'm like, at some point, these things that are they're just kids are going to become look. There's real life consequences that go with this.
yeah,
You know what I'm saying? Because it's not everything's not going to be, hey, I'm doing that in the house. That's going to permeate to outside the house where it's like, okay, you got a problem with authority. That ain't just going to be in the house. That's going to be, hey, I got a problem. You, I ain't okay. I ain't your daddy. Neither is your teacher. Neither is that police officer. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, okay, so your response to authority or being told what to do from somebody who has the right to tell you what to do.
you're right.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's not like we ain't on the same level. And for me, I grew up, kids have a voice, but not it your voice ain't never gonna be louder than the parents in the house.
And when you think about it, see, I grew up without having a voice,
Right.
like at all, not
Right.
even a little bit.
So you can't take their voice away.
Right, yeah.
And I'm like, zip, like you doing this? I need you to do this. And you looking at it like, no, because that's some of what I went through. And I'm like, I get it. You know what I'm saying? But there's that balance. And then like people always say, like kids can feel the energy and stuff like that. So they were smart enough to know, okay, play both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Play both sides.
They
And
definitely did.
even to this day, if we're being completely honest, and we had the conversation the other day just about the respect and different stuff like that, where it's like they still kind of do, you know what I mean? Still kind of do that. But I've learned like, okay, it ain't gonna stress nobody out but me if I'm sitting there and still on them, and they in one ear out the other, or they like, okay, I'm in your face, I'm gonna listen and be like, mm-hmm, but then no, so I'm like, okay, take my hands off, like, still love you, still here, but okay. And then some of that is like, for me, some of it was also like, okay, you have to see for yourself a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't come and always tell you like, look, I just feel like they disrespectful. Or I just feel like they're like some of that is okay, let me step back so you can see from your perspective. And then you can say, okay, now enough is enough.
Right.
You know what I mean? Where I can't guide your thought process on that, especially knowing like y'all relationship and where y'all started out at and where y'all came from. So it's like I don't just like you say like you don't want to form their opinion of their dad or anything like that. It's the same way. I don't want to influence your opinion on them based off of me just hey beating a dead horse. Right. It's like okay, pick your battles. Yeah, there's still times I come I'm like oh I want to wake them up. Wake them up and make them do what they need to do. But I'm just like, nope, nope. Like, woosah, rub the ears, go to bed.
Rub the ears?
Woosah. When he was woosah, he was rubbing the ears.
That's the TV coming out?
Yeah. But that's something I had to learn. You know what I'm saying? Because early in the marriage, it was,
How many for you? How many times did you was like, I'm out? More than me? Hey, wait. Probably more than me.
No, probably. But I remember when we was doing counseling before we got married. I don't know if you remember, but our and I don't want to put them on the spot, but our counselor said our biggest issue was going to be the kids.
Yeah. Yep.
Said that. And so like I would always think that and just remember back like no, am I prepared for what we've been going through? Like prepared? No, I'm not. But it's a little, I don't even want to say easier, but it's a little easier to handle simply because you know what I'm saying, somebody with wisdom said, you know what I'm saying, already said that. Right. So it was already like, okay, this is part of the test. This as much as you might want to be like, all right, yeah, I'm done. I can't. It's still like, okay, he said it was gonna happen this way. So listen, okay, figure out the steps to making it work and getting past this point, getting them to be adults, contributing members of society. Boom, you made it. So I mean that's kind of what always kept me where it was just like, all right, this is gonna be part. This is gonna be part of your life. Because to me when he told us that, it was like there's no getting around that.
Because that was what, 5 when we got married?
There's no getting around that. You know what I'm saying? It's yeah, it may not take as long, but that's gonna be your issue.
It was.
It is.
Hey, you're a hater.
Nah, I'm just kidding. Oh my goodness. Yeah, we need a flat surface. Sorry.
Just put it like that. Yes. I would have to agree. Like I didn't remember that until you actually just said it, that is something that we were told is that was going to be the issue. And it has been, our biggest issue. That has been our biggest issue. If I could be honest, I don't know what. All I can say is like I have this thing about being obedient to God, because there were many times where like I really had real plans to. I had real plans that I was leaving. It was a done deal. Like I wasn't staying. Um, like there were times we were looking for apartments.
She was gonna leave me, y'all.
No, we were leaving each other.
She was gonna leave me, y'all.
We were leaving each other.
I wasn't going nowhere. You trying to leave me in the house? It's all good. I digress.
You did. You went way left. We were going to. I mean, it probably was me. It probably was. I can be honest. Like there were times where I was just like, this ain't it. This ain't it. Like we done been hit with some rough stuff, and I just be like, I mean, who wants to live like this? So I mean, and that was always my solution. And we had a conversation one time where divorce was not supposed to be an option anytime we went through something. Guess who always said divorce was an option when we went through something? I sure did. I mean, I can admit it. You don't even got to do that because I can admit it. Like I would just be like, y'all, I'm serious when I say people really had to really talk to me sometimes. Like, no, that's not. You need to be obedient, because I was just cool. Like I was like I'm like a real cut and dry type of person too. And then I'm action. Like I need stuff to move. So for me, again, I'm gonna keep referencing this book because this book for me really kind of broke me in some places when I was holding on so hard to this. The blend happens after 8 years, and then for us, 8 years came and went, and we didn't blend. And so I feel like, okay, I'm doing everything that I can, but I'm the only one doing everything that I can. And because I had that mindset, I'm like, okay, well, I can't do this by myself. Like if I'm the only one trying to make this thing go, and I'm by myself out here, then I might as well be by myself out here, like in a different house by myself. But that's how I would feel, a lot of times. Like I had a couple friends this one time that was like, like my one friend got mad at me and pretty much told me off because I'm like, girl, please stop talking to me about God right now because this ain't got nothing to do with God, and my heart ain't in this no more. And she was just a little bit upset, a little tense, upset with me, um, because like I was starting to shut down. I'm one of those people that when I'm done, like I shut down, like okay, get out of my face. You're no longer a part of my world, type of person. Again, childhood stuff. But that's how I was, and I was getting to that point because I felt like I'm always saying the same things over and over and over when it comes to how this thing in my head should look. Like when I grew up, I was a avid reader, and I like the white picket fence, and we got 2.5 kids, and we got two cars, and we got all of these things that made the perfect family.
All we got is the two cars. We ain't got no fence. We got 6 kids.
Hey, stop.
My bad.
Anyways, so in my head, I had this picture. I tell people all the time, you have to get the picture out of your head when you get married. And for me, I had this picture in my head of how things were supposed to be when we got married. And listen, it my expectation of what I had the picture in my head, it was different, like way different. Um, and so trying to come to terms with my reality being totally knocked off kilter, but then I got to stay here too. It was very, very hard to deal with. I held on very, very tightly. When you grow up in an abusive home, when you finally figure out what normal is, you're striving for always normal. And that was me. I always needed normal. You have control issues. I had control issues, and not necessarily I'm trying to control him or control. I wanted to control what our inside of our house was, like what that atmosphere was. I wanted to control that, because I desperately wanted to stay away from the toxic atmospheres of growing up and my first marriage. So for me to walk into toxic, for lack of a better word, it almost took me out. It was very, very heartbreaking for me because I felt like, me and Jew was friends, y'all. Like we got a lot of years of friendship outside of dating, outside of anything. Like we had a lot of years of friendship. So I felt like if we couldn't get it right with nobody else, we getting it right because like we like boom pals. Like you here, you need money, I got you. I need. It was always that way between us. And so I felt like with the type of friendship that we had, and we was dating too sometimes, I was like, we can do this thing. We can do this thing. And it wasn't like that. It wasn't like that at all. It was very, very hard. Like sometimes I had to make myself think we're husband and wife. We're not best friends right now. Like this requires a husband and a wife having this conversation, not two best friends. And so there a lot of people be like, oh, the best relationships is, the best friends. Not in the beginning, not for us, because we were best friends. But I always found myself trying to respond to things that were going on as if I'm dealing with Jew, my best friend, not Jew, my husband. And so it made it difficult, really trying to peel back all these layers that, I don't know, maybe he had a perspective of what it was going to be like when we got married. But for me, that perspective was rocked when we got married, and my perfect little, dream that I had for us for so long, that's not it. That's not what I was handed, when we, finally had all the kids together, and now we're really trying to live life and, put the pieces together and do all those type of things. It was different. My book was not this, fairy tale book that I had been reading for so many years. Like literally, y'all, I read for years looking for fairy tales, literally. And so with Jew, because Jew was the literally even through my marriage, Jew was probably still the closest person to me. And so of course, when we decided we were getting married, I instantly went back to the fairy tale world that I had in my head, including with my kids. So on all sides, I think it wasn't fair of me, the perspective that I came in with. Like, I put more on him than I should have, just based off of my perspective. I tell wives all the time, you have to remember who it is that you're married to now. Like, what is your situation now, and not based off of the dream or the perspective that you thought it was going to be, because you're always literally hit with disappointment. And in order to not be hit with that disappointment, you got to not look at the dream world that you thought you were walking into. That's why you hear so many people will say, people pay all of this money for this one day to say I do, and then they're not prepared for what happens after I do, because they never really poured into getting prepared to actually be a husband or actually be a wife. That was me. I mean, I live rough with my ex-husband. So I literally thought getting married to Jew was going to be a breeze. I literally thought that. Like, this is my homie. Like, we've been friends since I was 18. We got married, what, I was 30, 31 or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, I literally thought it was going to be a breeze, me and him getting married. And I was hit with a lot of disappointment when that didn't happen, and that was based off of my perspective of who he was. Walking into marriage, I can't judge him based off of a perspective that's totally not him. Like, that wasn't even fair to him to have this image of him built up in my head and not really realize the reality of who I was marrying. And not saying that in a bad way, like he was this horrible guy, because he wasn't. But what I built up in my head was not truthfully who he was. And so then I walked away disappointed, like, what happened to the guy that's sweeping me off my feet and carrying me up the stairs and blowing bubble hearts at me and I'm catching them. I'm just saying, that's the kind of stuff I would be thinking.
And don't put me on Man Code Mondays for that.
That's in my head. It wasn't like it was in your head.
I'm just saying, how people.
Well, you keep talking. I'm gonna fix this thing.
You just gonna walk away?
Yeah, because that light is bothering me.
I guess. But really, like, when you say that, it just make me think of, like, when people are like some people are like, I like kids, I love kids. You know what I mean? But they don't have kids. So they love kids because I can always send them home.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like grandparents, aunties, uncles. That's why they the favorite, because you can always send them home. So it was kind of like that, where it's like, okay, yeah, I've been around, I've watched the kids, I've been around, but I've never had to discipline the kids. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, if you over my house and I'm babysitting, put that down. Okay, that's nothing.
Oh, I was looking like, what? I ain't even.
Wow.
My bad. Go ahead.
But you know what I'm saying? Even the kids, like, oh, well, I'm about to be over this dude's house that much longer anyway. So, and I probably ain't gonna see you tomorrow or the next day. But when you get married and you have to, from my perspective, you have to be the disciplinarian, then it's different, because then it's like, hold on. So you gonna tell me what to do today, and I got to come back here tomorrow and see you, or I got to sit in your face and see you all day after you told me what to do,
right?
And you ain't my daddy. Like, I told to you, like, our kids would have been said that if they ain't feel like they'd have got like the Bernie Mac treatment, like chop them in the. I honestly believe, like, but to me, like, it was always through their actions they were saying, you have no right to tell me what to do. But when I need something or I want something, hey man, can I go? Can I?
Right. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So it's like to me, that part to me was always the, okay, I understand they're kids, but at a certain age, it's like, what you're doing. Where it's like, I don't mind using you per se to get what I want. You know what I mean? Or benefit from a situation. And so my mindset, that makes it harder for me too, because then I'm like, I don't want to do nothing. Like,
I don't even want to buy you no candy.
Yeah, like I don't want to buy you no candy. You know what I mean?
I
So,
didn't buy you candy.
but that's realistic though. You know what I mean? Because there's so many different variables, man. Like I mean, even to the point where if we're being realistic, I mean, we have outside people that will come and basically tell to you like, he's so mean to your kids, or you know what I'm saying. So that's just one more thing that adds on to all the stuff you already got in your head. Right. You know what I mean? Like, okay, it's already not perfect, and this is what I'm seeing, right or wrong. This is my perspective, and then somebody else coming and confirming what I already thought, and then it's like, okay, but realistically, that person is saying that because I told them to do something. They didn't do it. That person is catching the tail end of the interaction. You know what I'm saying? They didn't see me 5 minutes ago say, stay right there. And then when I walk down the hall, here you go way down here somewhere you ain't supposed to be.
That really happened?
Huh?
That really happened. I mean, you was telling it like
yeah, really no. I'm just saying that's a situation that's happened, but that's the example I'm giving. You know what I'm saying? You're somewhere where I told you not to be at, and this person is seeing that.
So, in all honesty, would you say there was ever a point where you really was like, these kids can go with their dad?
Yeah, yes. Couple points. Couple points. Yeah, like, but it's and the thing about it was like, because for me it was like, go see if that's really what you want to, you know what I'm saying, what you want to do. Like, go ahead. And like, I know you like, they can't. I ain't letting them or what. And I'm just like, sometimes I know it's rough, but sometimes you got to be like, let me cut that cord. Okay. Because to me, my whole thing was they'll be back. Because I'm thinking like the grass ain't greener over there. Mm-hmm. But when you come back ready to follow some rules. Come back. You know what I'm saying? Know that, okay, the stuff I'm asking you to do or having you do ain't because I don't like you. It's because responsibility. You're going to have some no matter where you go, when you go, no matter how old you are. Mm-hmm. So, like we always talk about when we coach basketball, we always talk about like, we ain't looking at today. We trying to prepare you to make a high school team. Trying to prepare you to be the best one in the gym when you go to high school. One of the best ones in the gym. Our kids. I'm not looking at just today. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at when you want to stay out. You know what I'm saying? Can I trust you to stay out? Be home when you're supposed to be home. Like, I don't want the police bringing you to my door.
Right. Yeah.
This kid belong to you. You know what I'm saying? Like, those was the thing. That was my mindset, where it was like, okay, but it's a two-way street, really a three-way, because my street, your street, but then they street.
Now, do you mean their street in specific because they had a father who was in the background?
Yeah, and just their mindset, like that kid. Like I said last week, kids love their dad, regardless of what's going on. Kids love their dad, and they're going to listen to their dad. If their dad is telling them, "Oh well, she wasn't supposed to marry him," or "She left me for him," or whatever he's telling them, they're looking at it like, "Oh, he the bad guy."
Right.
My dad would, you know what I mean? So it's like, okay, you the bad guy. Yeah, I'll listen a little bit because I don't want no trouble. But when it comes down to it, I'm really not going to heed the stuff that you're saying. You know what I'm saying? So like those premarital conversations about discipline, like you said, about upbringings and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like those are vitally important. And even the ones with the kids, like, hey, we're getting married or we want to get married. How do y'all feel about that?
Yeah.
And a lot of kids probably will be like, oh, we cool. But realistically, yeah, like realistically, how do you feel about that? So, I mean, it's
a lot to be said for really, like sometimes we're so into being in love and wanting to spend the rest of our life together that I think we neglect some of the conversations that we truly should have. Like, I think if me and you would have had some of these conversations beforehand, a lot of things that hit our marriage probably wouldn't have hit our marriage. But we didn't have those conversations. I mean, we had our required marriage counseling. But if I'm holding back all my stuff that happened in childhood and all the stuff that happened in my marriage, not because I was trying to hide it per se, but I really did have that mindset that ain't got nothing to do with me and him. I didn't realize how bad that was going to affect us um, until it did. And then, of course, even when stuff started happening, it wasn't like, oh, that's because my childhood. Oh, that's
Mm-hmm.
good. It wasn't like that. It took years to be able to be in a place to admit where we could have did some things differently, and that especially came with having those conversations, and not only that, but being able to trust your spouse with those conversations. That's a really big thing. Like, can I trust you with what I'm about to bring to you?
Right.
And if you feel like you can't trust your spouse, then again, you're keeping those conversations back that should be had. You some At some point you got to have those hard conversations. And me and you both are very non-talkative when it comes to like emotions and stuff like that. Like, I'm very introverted, and I really can't say you introverted. Like, you one of those introverted extroverted type of people. It's a weird combination. Like, I help people a lot, so I guess to a certain extent I have some extrovert qualities. But I typically like being by myself. Like, you don't got to invite me because I was probably not coming anyway, and I was just going to stay home.
Can you not
Um,
say that? No.
I'm serious. Like, I like being at home. Like, I'm not. I like myself, so I don't mind spending time with myself. So I don't mind, chilling by myself or doing those type of things. So, but my emotions were always used against me. Like, literally any type of emotions I had, people picked it apart, and I'm talking about ex-husband and my dad. Like, that's how narcissistic people are, first of all. So those things were picked apart when it came to me, so I got used to not talking about my emotions. It was just one of those things I didn't talk about. Now, where Jews came from, where did yours come from? Because
About what?
non-talkative when it comes to emotions.
Just never talk about
See,
it. Growing up, just never talk
we
about
don't
it.
know where his came from. um
That's it. Growing up, just never talk. I mean, those weren't really conversations that we necessarily had. Like,
but see, these those are conversations that I think people should participate in.
yeah, I do too.
Yeah, now hindsight is 2020.
Yeah, but I mean, like we said, upbringing, like if that's how you was raised, where you and it's not even where you're made to suppress your emotions. It's just no conversation surrounding emotions.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, like you said, Jalen and I didn't have a normal childhood until a certain age. It's like Michael Jackson. People like, well, he ain't have a normal childhood. So when he, however old he is, he friends with Macaulay Culkin. Like, dude, you 40 and he's like 12. But it's because he never had a normal childhood. So he like, well, me and Macaulay kicking it, going to the amusement park, bubbles, all that different stuff. Same thing. You don't have those conversations. You don't have the opportunity to learn how to express emotion.
Yeah. Remember when Jalen and I was writing on walls at like 10?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember being at the gym and somebody wrote, one of them wrote Jalen or Janai Payne, Pain. I'm like, I'm sitting here like, oh, now you want my last name. When you about to get in trouble with the Y. No.
Yeah. But that's what I mean, though. Like, they didn't have your normal
Right.
upbringing. So it's like, now that they 10, when they was 2 and should have been writing on the walls, they didn't do that.
Right.
We was in this bubble. So then when they were 10 and, they got some stability, and that was probably before they was 10, but it was at an age where we was like, kids at this age don't write on walls. There was 7, I think, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But that was 2 years in for us when there was some stability, at least for them. Like, although Jalen and Janai were who they were, the stability was there. So they felt that. And so they started relaxing. So they started doing some stuff that I'd be like, where's that coming from? Like, y'all should have did that a long time ago. But it occurred to me after the fact that now, since they got some form of stability where we're not in that protective fight or flight type of mode, now I can relax and do the stuff that I probably would have been doing at 2 or 3, like writing on the walls. Like, so that's what they did. They wrote
Yeah,
on
but
walls.
we got to nip that in the bud. That was my mindset. We got to nip it.
But okay, so then this is my question. Because I was not open about how I grew up and about my marriage, do you think that prohibited how you then responded
Yeah,
to some of the things?
yeah, because like I said, some stuff wouldn't change because of the dynamic of the outside dynamic. Some stuff's not gonna change. You know what I mean? Like he's not gonna stop telling them he can't tell you what to do because you shared your story or shared what they're married. But stuff like that, okay, then maybe I could be like, all right, little more leniency, little more grace in those situations rather than, man, you too old to be writing on the walls. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying? Like, yeah, you still too old to be writing on the wall, but okay, now at least my understanding can be like, okay, when you was two, you probably didn't write on the walls. So I can just, you know what I'm saying? Like kind of do the correlation, like, all right, because that's been shared. But if that hasn't been shared, it's like, my thing is like, you old enough to know you don't write on walls at 10.
Mm-hmm.
All this paper in the house, and you want to write on our wall. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, in that aspect, yeah, I think Sharon would have made it better. Um, we are winding down. I think we got 4 minutes. So in closing, I'll just say, I mean, it's different strokes for different folks. So if you have your mind made up that, you know what, I'm not getting with anybody with kids, I mean, maybe that's your decision. You know what I'm saying? Maybe that's what you stick with. If that's not where God leads you, I would say have these conversations. Have conversations with the kids, both apart, together. Um, and one thing that I always tried to do, whether they believed it or not, was let them know, like, I'm not trying to replace your dad. Like, let the kids know you're not trying to replace their biological. That way, they can at least have that understanding. Like, okay, he, there's room for both of us to love you. There's room for you to love both individuals.
Mm-hmm.
But just those conversations, I think if you have past trauma, you need to share that. Again, it's not going to solve all your problems, but it is going to probably give some insight from both sides. Um, and like Tia said earlier, in my opinion, let go of that fantasy world that when I was 10, the teacher asked me where I was going to be when I was 25, and I said two kids, a dog, and pick it. No offense, but let that go. And I only say that because life usually doesn't happen like that. Things change, different variables happen, obstacles come, and I think not living your life like that helps you kind of deal with those obstacles. If Tia had never, I guess, embrace the fact that that's not real life, so to speak, I don't know if we would still be together. But kind of growing through that and understanding, even like I said earlier, I didn't necessarily have expectations like that, but obviously there are expectations of marriage. Um, I didn't expect to have issues with the kids like that. Yeah, even though our counselor said it, I still didn't expect like it to be what it became. But again, I think growing up through some of that, maturing through some of that, understanding that, okay, every single act can't be a battle. Again, if we don't figure that out, if I don't figure some of that out, we're not sitting right here talking to y'all. That's all
Yeah,
I got to say.
that's all you got to say.
That's all I got to say.
Yeah. I would say in closing, I actually agree. Those conversations have to happen um, because I think that's how we grow in marriage if we're having those conversations. Again, a lot of times people look at the amazing wedding that we just had, and we're not necessarily thinking about tomorrow. And let's just say it's not an issue, of stepkids. What about the kids you will have if you still had some of that stuff in your past? Those are the type of things. This is the person I'm spending the rest of my life with. Don't he deserve to know some of the trauma that I've lived with because it's part of his life now, especially if I at that time I'm still being triggered by some of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I think it does a disservice to whoever your potential person is if you don't have those conversations. It's not fair not to have those conversations. So that's what I would say. And again, I'm going to piggyback and say, leave your expectations at the door. Leave your expectations at the door. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing to have expectations. I think where we mess ourselves up is because we paint pictures of expectation.
Perfection.
Yeah, and then when it doesn't happen that way, then we walk away, disappointed with the whole entire thing.
Yeah.
And we make that equal the person, that is my husband or my wife, because my expectations weren't met. It's all of your fault now, and you have disappointed me. Versus realizing that it's really our expectations that should have never been there in the first place. And so that was my thing, Jude and had those type of expectations, but that was my thing.
That's a great analogy, Uncle Mo. Picket fences have points to them. Yeah.
Yes, that's very true. That's very true. But I mean, I didn't know that back then. I do now, but back then I didn't. I didn't. It was just we got a white picket fence, 2 cars, 2.5 kids, and maybe he just wanted to be a nurse. But in my head, the expectation was he was going to be a doctor, and he's satisfied being a nurse. This is his passion. But again, I'm disappointed and I'm upset because I said I was marrying a doctor and he only stopped at the nursing field. And so letting some of those expectations go and being in the present moment with who it is that you're with so you can actually grow together. Like, I think we've done a lot of growing, especially career wise. Like, who knew our careers would take off like they did? So Ju said we got to go. And we do, because it's 10:01 and we do try to be mindful. We one of those couples that we're always on time.
We gotta go.
We're always on time.
We gotta go.
And so next week, we're going to talk about something else. Again, if y'all have stuff that y'all want us to, kind of piggyback on based off of our marriage and the things that we found while trying to continuously blend our families, please let us know. But until then, y'all have a good night and we will be back next week.
Peace.
Peace. I shouldn't have said it in deep voice.
No. Are we still alive?
Yes, we're still alive.
Cut it off.